Welcome to the Nottingham Playhouse exhibit.
Mapping Merrick, The Real History of the Elephant Man. Have you seen our production of the real and imagined history of the Elephant Man yet? The Elephant Man, or Joseph Merrick, was local to the East Midlands. He was born in Leicester and spent his childhood there. Many of his first shows happened in and around Nottingham, not far from here at all. Follow the story of Joseph Merrick in the East Midlands and then his time in Whitechapel. The poem used by Merrick to sign his letters. 'Tis true my form is something odd, but blaming me is blaming God. Could I create myself anew, I would not fail in pleasing you. If I could reach from pole to pole, or grasp the ocean with a span, I would be measured by the stole. The mind's the standard of the man. On these boards, there are 3 maps dated from the late 19th to early 20th century. There are 2 of Leicester and 1 of Nottingham. Around these boards is text explaining significant locations to Joseph Merrick's life. Leicester. 50 Lee Street. This is where Joseph Merrick was born on 5th of August 1862. The shape of the road has now changed completely. An NCP car park stands there. Humberstone Gate. There was an annual May Fair held at Humberstone Gate. It was rumoured that there, a young pregnant woman fell from the crowd in front of a parading elephant. She managed to move out of the way. Although she wasn't hurt, the woman was distressed at this. At this point in time, it was a commonly held belief that emotional events that happen during pregnancy, such as this, could affect the child. In the autobiography published as a pamphlet to advertise his act when he was touring the East Midlands, Merrick writes that this was his mother, and that this event is what caused the abnormalities in his appearance. Whether this event occurred has been disputed. Church Street. This is where Merrick lived with his uncle, Charles Merrick, who was a hairdresser. Joseph Merrick lived here between 1877 and 1879 after leaving his father's home. By 1879, Charles was no longer able to support Merrick financially alongside his young children. Leicester Union Workhouse. This is where Merrick lived and worked between 1879 and the 3rd of August 1884. He signed himself out on 22nd of March 1880 to try and find work, but this was unsuccessful. He returned after 2 days. It was here in 1882 that Merrick had surgery. This surgery was done on a protrusion on the side of his face that had grown and started to affect his ability to eat or speak. Gladstone Vaults, 27 Wharf Street. Gladstone Music Hall was owned by Sam Torr. Joseph Merrick was exhibited here as the main attraction after he left Leicester Union Workhouse in 1864. The building was demolished in 2009. Now, a block of flats named Merrick House stands there. Green Man, 78 Wharf Street. Green Man was owned by Sam Torr, where he also performed. Similar to many of the venues on Wharf Street, it was a venue with a bad reputation. The original building is still standing today, although it is now empty and derelict. Welford Road Cemetery. This is where Merrick's mother Mary and brother William are buried. William died of scarlet fever in December 1870. Mary died in 1873. Belgrave Cemetery. This is where Merrick's father, Joseph, and sister, Marion, are buried. Nottingham. The Malt Cross. The Malt Cross was a music hall venue owned for a while by Sam Torr, Joseph Merrick's first manager. Merrick is rumoured to have been exhibited here. The Malt Cross is still open today as a venue and is one of the only Victorian music halls in the UK that is still standing. The Beehive. The Beehive was owned by J. Ellis, one of Merrick's managers. It may be the first place that Merrick was exhibited. It is located on the intersection of what used to be Millstone Street, now Huntingdon Street, and Beck Street, a 15-minute walk away from Nottingham Playhouse, between Snenton Market and the Litmus Building. The original building has been torn down, but you can find a picture of what it looked like by searching The Beehive on picturethepast.org.uk. Albion Street. Sam Torr, Merrick's first manager, was born on Albion Street in 1849. Shakespeare Street. Sam Torr died on Shakespeare Street in 1923. Whitechapel. 123 Whitechapel Road, now 259 Whitechapel Road. This is where Joseph Merrick was exhibited by Tom Norman between November 1884 and 1885. This was where Merrick met Friedrich Treves, who became his doctor. In November 1884, Treves had a private viewing of Merrick. On 2nd of December 1884, Treves presented Merrick at a meeting of the Pathological Society of London in Bloomsbury. Following this, Merrick asked not to be presented in this way again. Public opinion on Victorian freak show exhibitions was changing, and the shop at 123 Whitechapel Road was shut down by the police. Following this, Merrick went to Europe, where he found that opinion was very similar. Merrick was abandoned and robbed of all of his life's savings by a proprietor of the travelling fair in 1886. London Hospital. Merrick returned to London from Europe in 1886. He had no money and his condition had deteriorated. He tried to ask for help from people in the public, but they couldn't understand him. His only identifying possession was a calling card for Frederick Treves. Treves took Merrick to London Hospital in Whitechapel, directly opposite the shop where he'd been exhibited by Tom Norman. At London Hospital, Merrick was treated for 5 months. After this, he was deemed an incurable, meaning he was no longer eligible to stay at the hospital. As he was not a resident of London, he could not go to the workhouse there. Leicester Union Workhouse was too far away. On the 4th of December 1886, the head of London Hospital wrote a letter to the Times asking readers for suggestions. As a result of this letter, the public began to send in donations. These donations meant Merrick was able to stay at the hospital. He was moved from a small attic room to the basement, where he had 2 rooms by a small courtyard. Merrick stayed at London Hospital until he died on 11th of April 1890 at the age of 27. City of London Cemetery. This is where Merrick's soft tissue was buried, discovered by author Joe Vigor-Mungavin in 2019. Queen Mary University of London. This is where Merrick's skeleton is kept, along with some soft tissue. It has been studied extensively by the medical school. Joseph's Garden. This is a community garden and statue to commemorate Joseph Merrick that began construction in June 2023. It is within eyesight of both London Hospital and 123 Whitechapel Road and is supported by many organisations, including the NHS, Changing Faces and Tower Hamlets Community Housing. Find out more at josephsgarden.org. Access in a Grade 2 listed building. Nottingham Playhouse was designed by Peter Morrow. It opened in this location in 1963. Before this, the Nottingham Playhouse Theatre Company had operated out of a small and cramped theatre on Goldsmith Street. The building is an example of modern architecture. It became a Grade 2 star listed building in 1996. A Grade 2 listing means that it is of special interest, warranting every effort to preserve it. Only 6% of Grade 2 listed buildings are listed as Grade 2 star. The star indicates that the building is of particular national importance or special interest. Other buildings designed by Peter Morrow include Royal Festival Hall London, Theatre Royal Plymouth, Hull University's Gulbenkian Centre, and 3 theatres at the Academy of Performing Arts, Hong Kong. Designing Nottingham Playhouse. Morrow was asked to design a building that would promote theatre's public responsibility. It should be designed without the monumentality of older civic architecture. It was to be an emblem of national pride. Morrow believed that theatres should generate festivity and intrigue. The movement of people should animate it. This resulted in the open foyers of Nottingham Playhouse and the many glass windows on the front of the building. You can notice this philosophy in the design of the auditorium too. Morrow wrote that he had reduced the clutter that separates audience from actor. He favoured good views and acoustics over the glitz and glamour of traditional theatres. The audience is what completes the auditorium. Adapting the building for access. The Grade 2 star listing of the building means that some essential changes to improve access have been more difficult to install. This is because of the Council's Conservation Officer or Historic England must approve any changes to the building. Legally, any changes cannot alter the architecture of the building too much. In 2013, we had a conservation plan done. This cost £30,000 and means someone came and audited the building, noting, amongst other things, parts of the building that are of architectural interest. This must be consulted whenever changes are made. The main points of interest are the drum, the board markings, the window, and the egg-in-the-box theatre design. Changes are more likely to be approved if they are or appear to be temporary. We are not allowed to permanently alter the original structure, including by drilling onto the walls. This is why we have pods as meeting rooms on the upper foyer. They can be taken down without affecting the original structure at all. Some of the changes we have made. The forecourt. The forecourt has had multiple iterations. When Nottingham Playhouse was first built, this was a small roundabout where people could be dropped off in the car. When it was pedestrianised, before the lower glass doors were put in, the windows spanned across the whole of the front of the building. There were steps leading up along the front of the building to the door where it is now. These were shallow steps that ran from the corner of the building to the door. At another point in time, the forecourt was cobbled. The steps and the cobblestones were not sufficient for access purposes. It is now paved smoothly with handrails and a slope leading down to the lower glass doors, around Anish Kapoor's famous sky mirror. The lift. The lift was installed in Nottingham Playhouse in 1995. There was some resistance as the lift would obstruct view to the drum and the visual link between foyers. These were points of architectural interest of the building. It was decided that the lift would be constructed from glass, and the steel inside mimics the metal used elsewhere in the building's design. As it is made out of glass, you can see through it onto the drum and down to the foyers. The accessible toilets. The accessible toilets were also added around 1995. Before this, there won't have been any accessible toilets. This meant the entire building would not have been usable for anybody with certain access needs.